Today's episode is from the launch of the podcast. So the first year I did this, which was at the end of 2016, was as the coaching coordinator show. It was before I took it over to USA Football. And one of my first guests aired on that first day was Scott Peters, who at the time was running a company called Safe Football. He is now the assistant offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns, but continues to operate his company, and it's now called Tip of the Spear. Scott's done some incredible stuff in the offensive line area, and as he tells his story, you're going to see it all started with an injury and then just thinking about how to do things better. And I think Scott is a great thinker, a great mind in the game. I'm excited about what he's doing at the NFL level in his first year and helping Bill Callahan. He was able to bring the Browns to first as far as a rating in rushing and passing the Browns offensive line. So he's doing a great job there in the NFL. And this is part one of two. It's a longer podcast, 90 minutes long, where we get into how Scott started to think about this stuff and ways we can use better performance to create a safer game. So definitely one for every position to listen to. Here's Scott Peters, assistant offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns.
Our guest today on Coaching Coordinator is Scott Peters. Scott is the founder of Safe Football, and we'll talk about his company in a little bit. But Scott played football at Arizona State University. From there, he was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles. And then he had some interesting developments in his career, which led him to developing Safe Football and working with martial arts. Scott, welcome to our show today.
Thanks, Keith. Glad I'm here.
Well, fill in the blanks there, because I certainly left some, and you and I have talked quite a few times about what your company does. But give us some of your background and what happened to you in your career that led to this point.
Sure. Yeah. So I was an offensive lineman basically from day one. I was a fat kid, the kid that wore the shirt at the pool, all that, So I got thrown into offensive line right away. It was, but that wasn't until my freshman year of high school, because as a player, prior to that, I was too big to play. So my uncle played in the NFL for the Cowboys. He played at Cal Berkeley, and he kind of was a mentor growing up. And his advice to me was play other sports, and then football will be there if you choose to play in high school. So that's what I did. And I was a baseball player. I was a good player, and I wrestled, and I won this California state championship in junior high. And then I got to high school, and I was kind of chubby, but I was big, and I started to fill out. And when I wrestled, and actually this is embarrassing, but I'm going to admit to it. My mother made me do the swim team, so that was always kind of humiliating. So I learned humility pretty quick as a fat kid, but in a Speedo. But anyway, not to give a bad visual, but I ended up, when I got into football, it was like nothing I've ever seen before, because in baseball, for instance, you start off hitting the ball at the tee. You advance, in a process. So you go from a tee ball to underhand to pitching machine to then eventually live pitching against another player. But in football and in wrestling, very similar. You drill, you work on fundamentals before you jump into a match. And in swimming, obviously, you can't just start swimming without having some understanding of how to swim, and you got to have some guidance on that. Well, football was completely different for me and for everyone, really, if you think about it. My instruction, the extent of my instruction, not to put down my high school coaches. They're great. They were great guys, great coaches. But the extent of my instruction was literally, here's your pads, here's your helmet, go hit that guy there. And so I said, well, how do I do it? And, of course, that was disregarded. And this guy screamed out, told to go hit the guy. So I did. And that guy went flying. And then I advanced, and everyone told me I was good. But what was good? And see, to me, good is is a skill set. It's not an attribute. And I think in football, what I was struggling with, because the same issue went on in college. I got to college at Arizona State, and I had some great coaches there, but really, it's very hard to train and develop somebody to play the offensive line. It's an extremely technical position, although unfortunately 95% of the people out there are not playing with using the sound techniques. It's just usually the same kind of stuff I mentioned. It's get out there and smash the guy. So with that, I got to the NFL. I went through college, breezed through it, and really didn't get a lot of coaching. And there's very little time for the college players to work with their position coaches. So we spent that time in the off season in the weight room, getting bigger, faster, and stronger, and sometimes fatter. It just depends on what they want. So they value size and strength in the game. And so as I did that, I I continued and I advanced and I got better. And, but that was by virtue of adaptation and, on the job training. So I got drafted to the NFL and I was all excited because I remember getting really excited about getting to finally play for the best coaches and thinking, hey, I'm going to learn really what I'm supposed to do. I want to become the best. And when I was drafted by the Eagles, I noticed that the system that it wasn't that way. And again, not to put down any coaches, but it was more of an issue of the system, the structure. I realized quickly that the NFL is not a developmental league. You don't go there to develop yourself. You go there to audition. Right. The NFL is a business. It's an entertainment business, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way it is. With free agency, it's plug and play. The off-season development model is you upgrade the team through free agency and the draft, and you upgrade your existing players in the weight room. So then you got these advanced, complex offensive systems that are to take a ton of time to learn. I played center, and you have to know. I mean, these are the most sophisticated schemes in the game, and you've got these brilliant guys masterminding these schemes. You got the best athletes executing them. So then you got the biggest man on the field right over you as a center, and then you got to figure out where all 11 guys are coming or who's coming. So to account for those guys. So needless to say, the game itself is really a cerebral game, and it takes a lot of time for players to start to understand what to do, and very little time for players to learn how to do it. So in other words, that was my first introduction to the NFL, but that was something that persisted throughout my career. I did have a year with Jim McNally. I was very fortunate to play for Coach McNally, and by far the most technical coach I've ever played for. And we've reunited our friendship since I got done playing. We worked together, and the guy's amazing. I mean, there's not a better coach out there on any level, in my opinion. And it all starts with his willingness to learn, his adaptation, and he loves the game and technique. He's down to the minutia. This guy is the best, but I've had that same. He and I have had these conversations too about the way the game is. It's just very hard to develop people because of the time and the lack of There's a real lack of patience for development, and at a position like offensive line where it's such a highly skilled position where technique is paramount in the NFL's current culture with free agency. You plug a new guy in there, he doesn't make it. You plug the next guy in there, but how do you get that guy to pass block? The NFL's best pass rushers, they have an advantage inherently with just running forward at full speed, and we're basically doing a glorified backpedal trying to stop these guys. So that, in conjunction with all the different schemes, it takes a lot of skill and knowledge and experience to actually play at a high level. So fast forward that, toward the end of my career, I had some injuries, and I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu actually. So during my fifth season, I was in training camp, and I had some ankle pain, and I went to the trainer, the doctor. They wanted to do surgery. They wanted to take out some basic some bone spurs in there. So it was a minor procedure, but I woke up from surgery to the words, "Your career is over," and that was a tough thing to hear, and wasn't expected. And so I was put through the rehab process. They did a surgery called microfracture, which if anyone's listening that's interested in that surgery, do not do it. It doesn't work.
Sounds painful.
It was a test, trial. Yeah, it was painful, and it was a research-based project, but really I was the guinea pig there, and I don't recommend it. But what happens is with that surgery, they drill into bone, so I had to be non-weight bearing for about 12 weeks, and that's quite a bit of time to be on crutches. So I just find out my career's over. I got to finish this out and do the hand bike at the facility, and I was just getting bored and kind of depressed. So I was always a fan of UFC and MMA and stuff, and so I found a little gym in Charlotte, North Carolina, to do jiu-jitsu, which is a non-weight bearing activity. Most of the time you're on the ground, and it's I got in with these guys about twice my age, half my size. They're bankers, little guys, and they just kicked my ass all up and down the place. I mean, it was great. Honestly, it was great in a way that I'm like, it was enlightening.
So is this is after you were cleared, or you're still actually not cleared? You're doing the hand bike. At what point did you start?
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, no, I did it like almost immediately after the surgery, as soon as I could, about 3 weeks after.
Oh, wow.
And I let the trainers know I was doing it. I said, I'm it's going to be non-weight bearing, real passive, but it helps me get moving again. And the guys were cool. They took it easy on my ankle. I didn't have to stand or anything, so it was all on the ground.
Who were you with at this time? What team were you with?
I was with the Carolina Panthers at that time. But the moral of the story was I couldn't believe how I was literally one of the strongest players in the NFL. I benched like 600 pounds. I did, you do like 40 pull-ups at 315 pounds, but I couldn't, and I never got completely dominated like I did by these bankers. I mean, they put me in arm bars. They did things to me I couldn't stop. And I thought, wow, this is really, really cool. I mean, if you could check your ego and then get past the first wave of that, where we start to learn what this is, it's pretty amazing stuff. And I found a real passion for it. So I moved back to Phoenix, and I tried to find a gym that continued training, and I really had a hard time finding a good gym that was a place where you could have a professional, clean environment that wasn't a fight gym, but you could train with guys that really knew what they were doing. So, I kind of got the idea of starting up a business, and so I started up a mixed martial arts training facility in Scottsdale, and as a business, and I ended up getting a call. We had opened. I got a call from my agent, and he goes, "Hey, you want to play football?" And I go, "This is about a year later." So I literally hadn't run or lifted weights in an entire year. I got down to, my playing weight was about 305 or 350, between there and 315, and I was down to about 275. And he asked me if I hadn't lifted, I hadn't run, just nothing but groundwork on jiu-jitsu mats. And he asked me if I wanted to play. And I said, well, can I play? I don't know, if I could pass a physical. So he said, the Cardinals want to sign you. And I said, okay, great. So I went down and got a physical. They took the physical, and they go, well, we see you look great. So they signed me, even though it was pretty light. Russ Grimm was my line coach, and he goes, where the hell's the rest of you, man? I was so light. And I said, I'm 300 pounds. He goes, yeah, right. So I was not. I was very light. And I went up to training camp, and it was amazing because we went up to Flagstaff, where it's it's high altitude up there. And but the conditioning that I had on board with jiu-jitsu was incredible. It taught me how to breathe. It taught me a lot of things that really transferred very well to football. In fact, I gained about 10 more pounds. I got up to about just under 290 within a week. That didn't take long, but I was playing my best football I've ever played, and I credit jiu-jitsu. And it was amazing because I didn't do anything on the ground, no pounding, but my ankle held up great because of all the proprioception from being on the mats, the development of the different strengths that were, that by you kind of use your hands as feet. So you learn this amazing dexterity with the feet, and it recovered and rehabbed my ankle better than I could have ever imagined. So I ended up playing 2 more years. I started my MMA gym. I retired after the Cardinals 2008 Super Bowl run, kept running the gym, and I wanted to be an expert in jiu-jitsu, or at least an expert in MMA, because here's a football guy that doesn't know much about, MMA. So I wanted to really, become, establish myself in that field too. So I started training with some of the best. I brought guys in from Brazil. I brought some of the best guys in from Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, MMA, all across the board, judo, wrestling. And I started to train with those guys to really become an expert and to also start training guys myself. But then I started competing too in jiu-jitsu, and when I was able to do pretty well at that. I won 2 world championships in submission wrestling and grappling, which is jiu-jitsu without a gi on, which is a uniform. And at that point, I kind of had started training with Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar in the UFC, some major contenders around the world had brought me in because there's not a lot of big guys out there that have skills in jiu-jitsu. It's actually kind of a small guy sport. But if a big guy learns it, he could be extremely dominant. So that was kind of my role, and I embraced that and, ran my gym, and I kind of stayed away from football for about 2 years. Well, then I got asked to do some football combine training for a couple guys from a guy named Brett Fisher. He runs a big sports training facility out here, and he's one of the trainers for the Cardinals, and I said I'd do it. And I got back into the football thing, and I thought I missed this, And so I started to kind of apply some concepts that I learned in martial arts to football objectives. And I found that there's different things you can do that are going to optimize your performance and just better mechanics. And not just the better mechanics, but the better the training approach. I mean, in football, we train to get bigger, faster, stronger, like I mentioned earlier. And in fighting, it's literally you want to train to get better. That's what keeps you safe in the cage. So the light bulb kind of went on, and I thought, this is good. And I want to, how can I help the game of football? At that time, it was right around the time when Junior Seau's death happened, and Dave Dorson and all this stuff about CTE and the NFL concussion lawsuit was coming out. I mean, that left me in a kind of in a mindset that I was like, well, geez, this isn't good. I mean, we literally used our head all the time to hit. And as I got better and better throughout my NFL career, I stopped using my head as much because it just became a better methodology. But then when I learned the jiu-jitsu and I learned all the mechanics of these fighters, how strong somebody can be that's small, but by using mechanics, using a skeletal structure as opposed to pressing and doing things that we're so conditioned to doing with football, that the performance actually, the mechanics of this is going to yield far greater results And so I kind of tested that theory. I got hired by the University of Washington in 2012 to go up there and train their players. And we trained them in 2012 and 2013, and the offensive line, defensive line. The results that came back were pretty much like, I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I knew they were going to improve, but I didn't know to that degree. They had the top performing offense in school history, and they were number 2 in sacks on defense, because I've developed some pass rush moves that are specific, that came from different martial arts that are really, really effective. And but the most important part of that was that the trainer called me and said, we had not a single concussion in 2 years. We had not a single stinger in 2 years. This is the first time in school history. In fact, they even did a study with an accelerometer data, and they compared that to other schools like Michigan. I think Notre Dame was one of them, Alabama, and Washington had not even reached the threshold of concern on any of the hits. So in other words, they were taking their head out of contact, playing with their hands, and they were winning.
Who was the offensive line coach at the time there?
The line coach was Dan Cazzetto, and that was my college coach. So Cazzetto was the offensive line coach, and Sarkisian was there. Okay. He was a head coach, and we worked with, like I said, with the offensive line, defense line. We also had the tight ends. A few linebackers came in, and it was just drills. I showed the kids, leverage concepts here. Look at this. I really hadn't developed a program around it yet, but I kind of improvised and showed them, and they bought in, and we got that stuff implemented in the weight room. And the most important thing to say is that these guys didn't just do it. They did it all year round. They managed to incorporate many of the drills that I was teaching into their strength and conditioning program, which was kind of that missing link, because everybody's getting out there bigger, faster, stronger, but who's getting better? Well, this was a testament to that theory. And not to mention, it yielded much safer results. And so it's kind of I've never seen a win-win before with trainers, strength conditioning, and coaches and players. You always see somebody angry. The right. Trainers usually don't like what the players are doing. The coaches don't like the trainers around, so it was a fully integrated approach, and something everyone agreed on. So that was what kind of spawned Safe Football, because none of the movements, none of the techniques that I was teaching had anything ever incorporated the helmet. These are ways to generate more force on the field, apply and resisting more force, and yielding more control of the body, and being able to then manipulate and alter an opponent. So you're operating with perfect anatomical integrity. So you're coming with the strongest approach you can, and then you're starting to break down after contact. You break down that opponent in whatever for whatever capacity or objective you're trying to employ. So if we taught defenders how to soften shoulders to maintain gap control. We taught offensive linemen after contact how to torque and how to break guys down to define the running lanes for the backs and stuff. So it really worked great, and then that kind of took off from there. I went off and I formed Safe Football. And we've worked with over 450 high schools in the country to date since 2012, and we've had the same results we've had at Washington with the groups. And this is the disclaimer. There's a heavy disclaimer here that you have to develop the skill set. You can't just watch the film. You can't just visit a clinic or go to a camp. You have to actually make this a habit. But for those who have done that, we've heard the same things. We've got a better team, and we've got far fewer injuries, and in some cases we haven't. Teams have gone from 30 concussions in one season to 0, and that's happened here in Phoenix and across the country in certain locations where coaches really took initiative to make this a priority. And I think the number one thing to remember is that it is a performance program, and the byproduct of that is safety.
Right. And I think there's two standards, obviously, the coaches want to meet. Obviously, safety is one. The other is the effectiveness. But you did mention that the defensive line led the conference in sacks, I think you said.
They came in second in the NCAA over the 2 years. They had over 100 sacks, I believe it was the number. So,
how did the offense perform?
The offense performed great. So when you think about head contact and in pre-tackle helmet contact, and that's pretty much you think of the run game. That's where a lot of head contact occurs. I mean, you shouldn't be hitting your head too much as an offensive lineman on pass protection. Hopefully you're not doing that. But on the run game, that's where most of the the head injuries occur up front. And these guys rushed the ball for over 3,000 yards with Bishop Sankey in one of those seasons. I think it was 2013. And that's an incredible feat within itself to say that, hey, look, these guys did it, and they used their hands. So they came and they were an impressive offensive front, but they did their dominance with the hands, not the head. And that was something I thought was great, because then it's very hard to go out and tell a coach, hey, coach, I got a safe football program. And it's not better, but it's safer. Well, that's not going to fly.
Right.
We have to come from in order for this to sustain, for the game to continue and to sustain and actually recover, because a lot of time, and I'm noticing participation dropping around the country. This last year, 2016, it was the first year I've noticed that. I think it's starting to take hold, and I think people are questioning whether they should let their kids play. And I don't blame them. I mean, when you look at the news out there, the information's all bad. It's why would anybody in their right mind want their kid to play? That's a common thought process. And so my point is like, no, you can play. It's just like anything. You can, like swimming, you don't just let your kid abandon your kid at the pool. You're going to have to teach them the methodology. And that's the key here. We have to go back to that. We have to focus on that, and we have to put that has to take precedence and priority over scheme, especially at the youth and high school levels, because these kids don't know what they're doing yet. And the NFL guys, I mean, those guys are a product of those systems. So what you see there is you see the bigger, faster, stronger guys, and they're just doing what they've known how to do. And once those habits, once those routines, those techniques have become habitual, very hard to undo that. So what we want to do is key in on the youth and the high school, bring back some confidence, and that only comes by virtue of improvement and also by safer outcomes. So that's what we've been able to do. So we do an education program for parents. We just try to re-gear people, because our culture is kind of screwed up. And if you ask me, it's everybody's a winner mentality. Well, no, they're not all winners. You have to work at that. And the game requires it. To be good at this game, you have to put in the time. You have to do things others aren't willing to do. So it's not for everybody, and that's the carrot there. It's not for everybody, but it could be. It's simple. You can, a small guy can do far more than be far more productive than he thinks if he uses the methods. A big guy, if he can use those methods and not cut corners because he's getting away with his size, he can not only play without his helmet, but he can dominate anybody if he's a skilled technician. And that's the mission we have, is to prove that.
Well, Scott, this past offseason, I really focused a lot on, what are we doing on the field? And a lot of this comes back to my philosophy as a coach, which I think I first heard it from Joe Paterno, is that, first players need to learn what they're supposed to do. Then they need to know how to do it. And then they can play with, aggressiveness, with confidence. And I think going back to some of the things you said, when you first started playing football, here's your pads, here's your helmet, go get them. And so we're, at that stage, we're not hitting really any of those things. You're expected to have the confidence right away, go get them, go hit somebody, and you're going to get that confidence by just, repeatedly running some of those contact drills. And that's what we've seen kind of at the youth football level. Then you talked about your experience in the NFL, where it's really more, okay, we're going to focus a ton on how to do it. On what to do. Make your calls, obviously complicated line calls. You're seeing all kinds of exotic blitzes, defensive line movements, et cetera. We're going to focus so much on that we don't really develop that how, and you're back to, okay, kid, here's your pads, here's your helmet, go get them. All right, make your calls, go get them. So moving forward, I spent actually a whole day talking to guys on Twitter about the dangers of the Oklahoma drill. I even wrote an article about it and thinking about how that drill applies to the things that you actually see on the field. In fact, on Facebook today, I saw another drill, which I thought was completely stupid, where guys from either side are running over agility bags and meeting each other in the middle as fast as they can go to hit each other. And one of the common responses from guys was, well, it's something to get the juices flowing. It's something to, to teach them aggressiveness. It's something to get them tougher. And I think eventually, in our society, in our day and age, especially with some of the things now we're discovering about CTE, concussions, et cetera, that, if your answer is, well, I needed to get the juices flowing, or, I got to develop toughness in players, that, an attorney is going to take you to task someday on those types of things. So I know you really look at that kind of stuff with safe football. Could you maybe shed some more light on that and, I guess, fill in the blanks that I've left there?
Yeah, absolutely. You made a great point. And I was just on Twitter, too, the other day, and someone pointed out there was a group. It was I don't even remember the name of the group. I don't want to sell them out too bad, but there was a group that was promoting, hey, submit a picture of your helmet, and whoever has the most battle scars wins. And so it's promoting like these scars on the helmet. So it's basically promoting who's hitting with their face the most or their head. And I'll equate that to like bragging about, being poor. Who's more poor? I mean, I don't understand it. Why would you want to pay more at the cost and the expense of your most vital organ, your brain, when you don't have to? And so the key is that, and what I'm suggesting is, I'm not suggesting that the helmet can't have a role in it. The helmet protects you, but to me, it's more like an airbag of a car. You're not going to I got a great airbag, so I'm going to drive like an idiot. I want to be a skilled driver. I want to execute my job, and I want to do it at the least cost to me. And that's really the way we need to think. And in fact, that's a more productive way to play, and that's a more effective way to play, because you're performing at a higher level. Your brain is not, an operating system. It's not you're not using your computer hard drive to blow down a door. Why would you do the same with your head? I mean, your head you got so much to think about. It's a very the game itself requires a lot of intelligence. It does, to play. So let's keep that intact, and we can use other tools and play at a better level and be more effective and prolong our careers and actually extend the game. So our slogan is save the brain, save the game. And that's really the key, because if we don't do that, you can look at helmets, you can look at all these other things like restrictions and penalties, but you got to start with avoiding helmet contact. And that's really the key, but that can be done through a methodology. And so the drills that you're bringing up, I've kind of done with Safe Football just to kind of give coaches, we have 7 key traits that we find in high-risk drills.
What's a high-risk drill?
That's a drill that it's usually a one-on-one competitive drill or 1v3 or more competitive drill with contact and practice that doesn't really yield a result that we're looking for. It doesn't have a high game impact. So we have basically a grid or a matrix. We call it a risk drill matrix. And basically on the vertical column, it's game impact. And that's like, a 10 out of 10 would be like you're using a drill that would be specific to something that happens and correlates to the game itself. And then 0 would be something that doesn't. On the horizontal grid, it's risk. So 0 is zero risk and 10 is high risk. So Oklahoma drill is the one that most of us know. Everybody knows universally. That's a 10 risk and that's a 0 or 1 or 2 game impact, because really it's 0, because I've never seen a situation where the defense has no gap responsibility. There's no accountability. And then the back has no entry. There's no entry for the running back. So it's usually just read the guy and go. So it's the job of the player on offense, the guy lining up, whether it's the offensive line versus defensive line or a linebacker versus a tight end or somebody or even a receiver's on the edge of the corner. There is no objective. There's no objective where the ball's defined, and there's no gap responsibility. It's literally, let's just smash the guy and read and maybe make a play. So that's not a high risk. That's a high risk drill with little game impact. So we want to cut those kind of drills out. You see other ones like the get up and go drill, which or some people call it that. It's where you're basically laying on your back, head to head, or even at a depth, and you get up on the coach's whistle and you smash each other. So those are drills that don't work. And the 7 defining traits that we've kind of put together for this. The first one is, does the drill promote development of a position-specific skill? So if you're blocking somebody, and you have a specific application, it goes hand in hand with the second rule or trait. And that is, does the drill coincide with the offensive or defensive scheme? So both of those things should be present in drills that coaches are picking. The third is, does the contact drill last more than 8 seconds in duration? That's 8 seconds is the average football play. So you see drills like the gauntlet drill and others or the bull in the ring where, you get one player out there and he's in there for 30 or 40 seconds. Meanwhile, guys are just coming at him. I mean, that doesn't reflect football in any capacity. You brought up, getting juice, getting up. Well, the reality is if you should have that. That's inherent with playing this game. You have to be tough. You have to be physical, and you have to be willing to play at a high level and get up for it. Those are just prerequisites. So if you need a drill it's like taking hammers to your fingers. You don't need to do that. You can. Why are you doing this to prove? What are you proving? This is just a kind of a meathead mentality, and it's not intelligent, and it's not advancing the game. So the fourth one is, does the drill involve a collision from a distance of 5 yards or more? So when you're doing a one-on-one drill with contact, everything can be done in short capacity, but you get guys starting at 15 yards depth. Again, usually these drills don't involve any application for scheme, so it's just usually like a meat grinder. Let's see who can hit the guy harder and dominate the guy physically, but it doesn't really tell the whole story. It doesn't make you better. The next one, the fifth one, is, does the drill involve equipment that obstructs the player's footing or posture? Chutes. I don't know how you feel about chutes, but I couldn't be in further disagreement from using the chutes. And we used to use those in college. And what you find is if you look at anybody using chutes, you see bad posture. Guys can't keep their head up. Their elbows come out. Their low back gets rounded. They're doing everything they can do to squeeze their big bodies through those chutes. So when you line up a guy across from you in the chutes and you have a contact drill, you're promoting bad posture, and you're promoting, again, it goes back to these other key traits. It's just not a good drill. It's not safe, and it's not effective.
No, we used those chutes in high school, and our coach called the drill the guillotine. And honestly, the objective for the guy not in the chute was to drive him back and put that guy's neck right into the back of the chute. I mean,
oh boy,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
so.
Well, it's really on par with. Remember when I'm sure you've seen this too. I know I kind of got a taste of this as a young player when they used to pull water from us because we weren't tough enough.
Right.
So it's like you're deprived. Or we know no water breaks. Well, if you kind of break it down, people talk about performance enhancing drugs. Well, you know what the number one performance enhancing substance is? It's water. And so if you're a coach and you're thinking that you're going to get more out of your team by depriving water, it's the same mindset as saying that you should go do a drill like the guillotine drill or something. It's not effective. It doesn't yield a result. If you're just trying to be tougher, then, well, a lot of people are tough, but they're not very smart. So we want to, the best players are tough and smart. And that's what we're trying to say here. And so the next one is, I did mention the obstruction. So not just the shoots, but the boards. I saw a kid dislocate his knee on a board it was a one-on-one run blocking drill. And again, you're lining them up directly head to head. It's usually a lead step. Guys fire off. They hit head first, and then as the play progresses, as the snap progresses, you could lose footing. You get a foot caught on the board. You twist a knee, and you blow out something. So those are other traits of high risk drills. The last two. Here's number 6. Does the drill involve live contact with one player versus 3 or more opponents? And that's a drill like the gauntlet drill, where one guy runs downfield, he hits the first guy, then he hits a series of guys. Well, that's just not realistic in football. You might have a situation where you're engaged with 2 guys, but it's part of a strategic effort, and these drills don't provide that. And the final one is 7. Does the live contact drill keep the defense honest? If you're going in, some of the biggest collisions I've ever experienced in football were in practice in the NFL when it's an inside run drill in training camp, because the defense knows what it is. The linebackers are not held accountable to the passing game. There's nothing more than just downhill and smash the guy. So those kind of impacts aren't necessary because they don't correlate to the game. And if anybody that thinks that they are necessary, you're contributing to the downfall of football. And we have to reevaluate that. And I'm not going to talk about. I'm not trying to chastise people as much as we are trying to say, hey, look, this is not, you got to ask yourself objectively, is this better? And if I'm a coach, I'm thinking, how do I get my kids to do what we're trying to do? We have an offense, we have a defense, and how do I develop these kids in short order? Because it's hard anymore, limited time. Well, you got to take these kind of drills out, if not from a safety standpoint, from an ineffective, it's not an efficient use of time either. So there's a number of reasons not to do these, and that's something that everybody needs to look at. But again, this goes back to really the key here is that the culture needs to change. We have to think differently. And that's really what this is all about. How do we approach this? And I think the best guys in the game, the best coaches and the best players are thinking this way. We just need the rest of the group to step up. And that's possible. But like I've always said, too, with concussions, now that we've proven that you can prevent these concussions. We've proven you can eliminate head contact or at least, reduce it dramatically with skill. So that's the goal is to do that. And how do we get back to that? Well, that's through skill development. And concussions are preventable. They are. And you don't have to not play football to prevent them. You can't make football entirely safe. You can't make golfing entirely safe. I mean, things happen. But if you can, mitigate those risks through skill and development in the right places, you got a real good chance. And, as far as it goes as far as the mentality that's pervasive in the game, we just need people to step up. There needs to be, everyone's looking to Roger Goodell and the NFL to do something. Well, again, it goes back to business. It's a business. It's an entertainment venue. And people watch the game. They want to watch big hits. And the players that do it with, they're playing their best. I mean, these guys, you can't just punish a guy for hitting the same way he's always done it and expect him to change. He's at the highest level of play. If he alters his play on any front, he might lose his job. And that's something that we all know, but we have to look at the youth and the high schools and say, and not glamorize winning at the cost and the expense of your brain. But like I said, with those
Sure.
battle scars, that's just ridiculous,
Well,
so we have to look at it more holistically.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I think you and I started talking about a year ago as Buddy was gearing up for the concussion movie to come out. But, I contend that it's really the game's going to be saved by coaches, period.
I agree.
It's not Rydell or someone else is going to come out with a better helmet.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't airbags in cars before. At one point, we had lap belts. They become a lot safer, but it doesn't mean, hey, let's test it out. It's taking the head out of the game, which you talk about all the time. Remove the head as a tool for contact. And a lot of this is it's a matter of education. Guys have grown up playing the game a certain way. They've been coached a certain way. That's all they know. It doesn't mean that they're doing anything maliciously, and I don't want to say that, but at the same time, when I see some of these things being glorified, some of these drills, put up on social media, on Facebook, and like you said, the scars on the helmet, et cetera, we have an issue right there, and that's where our culture needs to be changed through education, through things that you're doing, through hopefully something like this that is getting out there to coaches that they can pass down to their youth coaches, to fathers who want their kids to play football, but know that they can't play it the way that it's being played right now. What is the appropriate time for a kid to start playing tackle football?
This is the number one question I get, or hey, would you let your son play? And it's a subjective question and a subjective answer. I think it's hard to say because some kids, really, in my view, it's a couple things have to be at play at once. You have to. If I had a son and he wanted to play football, here's my process. If I was to go about it like this, first of all, can his body withstand? Can he control his body effectively? Control his body? Does he have full body control with his equipment? And I see kids wearing helmets that they can. And I think John Madden made a point about it. He goes, "Well, we just potty trained a kid, and now we put a helmet on him. These helmets are heavy. You get a helmet on a kid, it's like a bobblehead. He goes around there. He's got a developing brain, but his neck is not capable of supporting that helmet. So do I think he should play? Absolutely not. That's one thing. So I don't know the exact answer to that. It's dependent upon. It's probably to a player by player. But that's one attribute I think you got to look at. Another one is does the kid want to play? Because sometimes I see kids that go out there. I was an example of a kid. I did play 1 year of youth football. I mentioned I didn't, but I played 1 year when I was 9. And it was a horrible experience because I was a fat kid. I got thrown out there with kids that were 12 and 13, and I had no testosterone in my bloodstream. I was just like, I'm wearing this heavy equipment, and coaches are screaming at me. It's like, this isn't fun. And I think a lot of times kids they write off the game, and maybe they don't ever come back to it because of that. And I think dads, it's who's coaching you? That's my next question. Who is coaching these kids? And it should be taken very seriously. And I get it. You don't have to have played in the NFL to coach somebody. You don't have to have played at any level to coach somebody. You have to be somebody that comes with a mindset that I want to learn the best and most effective and appropriate tools for coaching. That information exists. To finish off that last segment, that point about, it's really not a concussion issue. It's an information issue.
Right.
Information exists. It's out there. We provide it. Others are starting to provide it. It's just about, but it yields a better outcome. So you're not asking kids to do something to compromise their performance. You're asking them to increase it, holding them accountable, which is what you need to do. You can't, coaches, it starts with them. You said it. The coaches are going to either save the game or they're going to bury it. And it's not coaches at the NFL level. It's not college coaches. It's really the youth football coaches. It's the high school coaches. Those guys. So they're the true leadership in this thing. They got to know that. They're the guys that are most important in this function. And for them, it's imperative that they stop doing what they did, and they got to evolve. Any species that fails to, the only reason things evolve is because of necessity. That's the only cause for evolution. We're there at this point with football. We either evolve or we die, and the game turns into a game of socioeconomics, where only the inner city kids are playing as a tool to get out of the inner city. Well, the suburban kids are not going to play anymore. Let's face it. If we don't do something, and we need to protect every kid, and that's the key. It comes from adults, and I think adults. When I watch some of these drills on YouTube, it's upsetting because you just go, wait, and clearly some of these guys either started with a half a deck, or they lost a lot of brain cells in the process when they were playing, so they want to inflict that on the kids, or they don't know any better. But that's why, these leagues have to take some responsibility as well. Organizations of youth football are privately owned for the most part. Well, their business is in jeopardy because we're talking about, multiple leagues. It's dividing the market share. Pop Warner's down like 2,000% or something like that, something crazy. And it's not just because of concussions. It's because there's other emerging leagues. Well, the league, in my opinion, the leagues have to start looking at, how do you differentiate? They got a real problem here, and that's participation is on the decline. And that's not just football. That's sports in general in the country, but football, is leading it because of these injuries and the fear around it. So how do you combat fear? It's information. You got to provide that, and you got to take a good look at who's coaching these kids. That's the arm. That's the key channel there for these kids. It's not what they watch on television. It's who's their leadership, who's teaching them, and how are they conducting it. And I think that's what we have to look for in order to save the game.
I had a couple follow-up questions on your standard. Thank you for sharing those. I think those are very useful. You mentioned in the first part of it, scheme. Like, is it specific to a scheme? So we'll get a little bit, I think, more into safe football, but let's focus on that for a second. I mean, let's say it's a team who's, I don't know, let's say it's an option team and thinking, well, maybe this stuff is only effective with, pro style type of schemes or zone or whatever it might be. What's the applicability of these techniques to something where guys are used to coaching? For them, what's most effective? Let's get the guy in a flat back stance, fire off the ball as hard as he can because we're going to be by in a second and a half anyway. Well, how does it apply that way?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's a universal contact. I've boiled this thing down because we had to come up with a curriculum that worked for everybody. We're not just working with linemen here. We work with all positions. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, I'm sure. But what we've discovered is when it comes down to it, contact is there are some key principles of contact, and that's applicable and universal for whether you're blocking, you're shedding a block, or engaging a blocker, or you're tackling. Whatever the form of contact is, and regardless of the player, there's some key principles there. And the first one, we have an acronym. It's called BLAST. You can see it on our website at safefootball.org, and it's a great video. It kind of defines leverage, and it's applicable. Again, it's universal. So BLAST, the B stands for form a good base, a triangular base. You want your toes out. So a lot of coaches I've seen telling kids have your toes pointed straight ahead. Well, that doesn't allow us to generate our full hip extension, the position we call arch strength. It's where our hips come to extension. If you've ever seen a suplex by a wrestler, he can take a guy his size or bigger and throw him clear over his head, but he has to do that by bringing his hips to extension. By having your toes out with your full foot on the ground, but you got that weight distributed on the insteps and a good posture, you're now capable of lifting from the ground. The only source of the only area that we can draw from our energy from. We don't have a bench press behind us. We have the ground to work with. So we need to keep our feet grounded and our feet behind and our hands in front. That's a huge posture. Coach McNally talks about it. Those are postures to protect and to generate more force. So with that said, how do you deal with like a group that's running the wing T or they want to fire off the ball? Well, firing off with lead steps is not an effective tool. It's just not if you're blocking. And the reason for that is because, number one, if you kind of look at your feet, you look at your feet and you say, I'm going to take a step forward. Well, now you might have a big, what we're trying to promote there is a big strike initially. You get a big strike, so you fire off, boom, I can get more impact with my head or the point of contact, and usually this does equate to head-to-head contact. If I take a lead step, and that's been done for years, and that's clearly a problem. So what we say is that lead steps don't work. We need to, whatever the fit is, whatever the footwork is, we have to keep our both feet behind us at the point of contact. The feet behind us, and what actually moves people is not the delivery of a step. It's not a strike. It's an actual lift. You're deflecting force. Because if you think about it like this, now this can apply to any situation. It applies to any scheme. If it's a one-on-one base blocking situation, and I'm trying to get to control a defender, and whether I want to get movement or I want to stretch the holes, whatever it is, I want to be in a posture that can sustain that. And by stepping at a guy, you've really disabled your hips now. So I always kind of use this analogy. If you took a medicine ball, take a 15-pound medicine ball, and if you got an even base, and you hold that ball between your legs, you kind of hold it like a punch bowl, drop it between your legs, and try to throw it forward for distance from like an underhanded throw. Well, your hips are really driving that process. Now, if you do the same thing, if you put one foot in front of the other and you try to do that, well, you're not going to get nearly the same amount of movement on the ball. The ball's because you're using, arguably half of your hips. You're not using all your hips. So, every coach in America will tell kids to use their hips, but they're very seldom teaching the proper methods to do it. And then they're not drilling that and incorporating that. So when it comes to coming out, it's really a universal practice, whether you're blocking, shedding, or tackling, is to have both feet behind you. You want the movement and the force to be generated from the uncoiling of the hips. That's where the movement occurs, and then the steps follow that once movement has happened. Does that make sense? It's hard to kind of paint that visual, but
complete sense. You look at a guy, for example, we're talking about moving stuff, right? We're moving people, but if you look at a guy with the Atlas stones, or you mentioned, some other things I've heard you talk about, like the caber toss, they're not doing that from a staggered position.
Right. They're allowing them their greatest resource, their greatest source of power. It's like nuclear power. If you could tap into that, it's incredible. People that know how to do this, they're like the guys that everybody goes, he's got that crazy field strength, whatever they used to say. Well, that just means he's functional. He knows how to move somebody. That's a key to leverage. So just to touch on those leverage points, have a good base. It all starts with that, the base posture. Triangular base, toes out, hands in front. In the guard position, we call it, low back arch, head up, vertical spine, with knees bent, elbows in. You shouldn't see the elbows from behind the body. And then the second one is play long. We want to use our arms, play long. That allows us to generate force if we do it in the proper manner with the right mechanics, to use our hands, and then to also create separation between us and an opponent. That yields better control and vision of the field beyond them. Because you're not just playing against one out there, as you know. You got to play, there's 11 on 11. And so we got to be able to see the field. But if you're mired in with your head, you don't see it, and you're ineffective, you're off balance, and a guy's going to pull you, he's going to shed you, or if you're a defender, you're just not operating with the same strength. You can't see the backfield. So play long is number 2. A in the BLAST acronym is ascend the hips. So your hips should come on an ascending path, and that's all it kind of ties back into having a good base. And then the next one is stay square. One thing you'll hear Coach McNally talk about, if there's only one coaching point that the guy ever uses, it's stay square all the time. You want to stay square, whether that's pass pro, whether that's run blocking. But that's true for tackling in the open field. If you're turned, you're compromised. So by staying square, you want to have that base. You want to keep those feet behind you, and you want to attack that target vertically, but you want to keep a square base all the time. That allows you to get to that arc strength position I mentioned. And the final one is triangulate. Triangulate is basically attacking off center line. So when you see guys that come, run and approach a defender or a ball carrier or whatever your position is, if you're, whatever contact you're approaching to engage, you see guys, the head-to-head contact occurs when you run right down the middle. That's insanity. Why would you run? That's exactly where the guy's got the most force.
Right.
So it takes more force to stop that guy, to reroute him, to stop his momentum, and then to carry out an objective than it would if you attack off center line. So therefore, like if you're using the shoulder in a high-speed collision, you want to offset that guy, and you do it based on position-specific or scheme-specific application. So if I'm a tackler, I'm an open field tackler, and I know my help's coming from my right, then I'm going to offset the guy. I'm going to offset to the left so I can help, and make contact with my shoulder. That's easy. If I come down the middle with my head leading, I'm subject to a lot of problems and also to missing a tackle altogether. And maybe he skates around me and to the side where I don't have help. So these things are very universal, and that's kind of why we put the curriculum into a package and said, hey, whether you're doing, no matter what you're doing, these are the key concepts here. And then we get into the exact fits, and then we get into position-specific objectives too. But principles of contact are something that everybody should understand.
On our next episode, we'll get into more of this, and Scott starts talking about something he shared at the Cool Clinic and some of the questions that he fielded there. Again, some very interesting stuff, and how Scott has been able to focus on performance with the results of being better, safer techniques. So join us tomorrow, and if you're interested in Scott's stuff, go to tipofthespearfootball.com to check out what he's doing, the techniques he's put together. Just some incredible stuff there for both sides of the ball in all positions. Again, that's tipofthespearfootball.com.